I'm Craig Kenneth, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. Every relationship is different and every breakup is different. Work with me and you'll get professional help on your situation. And if you're in no contact, focused on personal growth, my workbook series, The Knowledge, will help you make changes like you've never made before. Available now at AskCraig.net. Hi there, I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And in this video, we're going to be talking to you about don't make a mess of your breakup.
Don't do it. But if you do, we are here to talk to you. Craig and I are available for coaching sessions. So if that's something you're interested in, you can head to the website and book from there.
Yeah. How often do you find yourself cleaning up other messes, especially from other coaches that give
We try.
bad advice?
We try. And it can be hard to not be so erratic and impulsive when you're going through a breakup because you're going through so many different emotions.
Yeah. But there's a lot of immature strategies and advice out there, so you got to be careful. I do want to say one thing that I've heard a little bit more often recently is there are coaches that will say if you haven't reached or heard from your ex within 6 months, reach out. I would absolutely tell you not to do that because many times that is right around the time that your ex is going to start reaching out to you. There are a lot of breakups where your ex will reach out around that point, but if you reach out first, it's likely going to kill the attraction and the anxiety. They feel like all that time they've been wondering about losing you, it's now just gone.
Mm-hmm. And we talk about no contact indefinitely. So that means indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to say that because I've had quite a few people that have reached out and they're like, well, so-and-so said reach out at 6 months. That's a good time to reach. No, so-and-so doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry to say it, but if they're telling you to reach out at 6 months, then they're not getting a lot of success stories because that is when a lot of times, especially avoidance, they come back, right?
Right.
So you reach out first, you're only going to hurt your chances.
Right.
So, unfortunately, we have to help you guys fix a lot of messes and clean up a lot of situations. We understand. I get it. I've been there. I've openly talked about it since I launched the channel, all the mistakes that I've made.
Me
You
too.
talked about it too.
Sadly. But it's true.
Yeah. And even some of the breakups that were like, I was trying to say, don't do that, don't do that.
I'm like, I don't hear you, Greg. But it does happen. You know, we're going through so much in that moment. And our mind convinces us that we need to do this one thing or this other thing just to get it off our chest or to connect with them somehow.
Yes.
And our mind really plays tricks on us when we're our most vulnerable.
Yep.
So we completely understand.
It's very, very difficult. But you have to have emotional self-control. It's absolutely critical to reattract somebody. So I thought this would be a good one to share with you guys. He says that we started dating officially in the summer of 2022. She and I broke up in the spring of this year after dating for about a year and 9 months. We both live with our parents still.
That's something that's quite normal in your 20s.
Sure.
Especially in this economy.
Yeah, it's tough. But when somebody's still living at home, it also has a big impact on the influence that they're having, right?
And on the relationship, stressors, parents' opinions, values.
And that comes into play in this one. He says, we were really happy together, close with each other and our families, and had strong feelings for each other. We first met when we were in kindergarten, about 20 years ago.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
And I find that these stories where people had some sort of connection in the past, there's almost something magical feeling about it. Everybody loves a good love story. And so when you realize, oh man, we went to kindergarten together, or we have this one photo together from when we were kids.
Yeah.
You know, there's almost an element of magic to it that can be really difficult to let go of. So
It's so true. For me, it was love at first sight. We would both send each other Valentine's gifts each year from then on and would say we're boyfriend and girlfriend, although not officially.
Okay.
She was bullied by people in high school. This was to the point of her feeling suicidal and worried about how she looked, what others thought, etc. Okay, so obviously that would have been really stressful and traumatic. To go through that kind of bullying really has a big impact on someone. Now remember, she's also in her early 20s, so she's still not too far away from that trauma. You know, she's not 10 years away from it, where she's had time to get through it, you know, mature, gain some perspective,
Right. And
get some therapy.
Kids can be so mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes those words can stick with you for years. So, you know, I wonder what impact it had on her own self-esteem. I wonder what impact it had on, you know, her self-perception and how that might have seeped into a relationship.
Yep. She ended up getting therapy and is medicated with antidepressants as a result of that whole situation.
And that should also be a PSA to all parents to watch how your kids treat others, because bullying is a really big issue, you know, leading people to the point of wanting to not be here anymore.
Yep.
So it's something that I think should be taken more and more seriously.
Yeah, and of course, watching your own kids very closely, you know,
Right.
could be tough at that age. They really shut down.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be with their peers and talking with their friends more so than with their parents.
Right, right.
She overthinks, is insecure, and anxious. She also told me that she had been mentally, physically, and even once sexually abused by her previous 3 partners before me. Wow, so she's had a lot of trauma. In the weeks before the breakup, we began to argue over not spending time together, canceling plans we had made because she works part-time, has a lot of free time at home around her family, other than one day at university and casual work. Okay, so this is important. He said we began to argue over not spending time together, canceling plans we had made. So that tells me she's canceling plans.
I know, there's one side here who's...
He's getting anxious. Okay? He's arguing with her because he wants more time with her. And boy, I see a lot of breakups because of this reason. She's going to feel guilty. He's pressuring her, and that's going to make her lose attraction. I could already sense it.
Right, and this can be one of those lose-lose situations to where, because this has been such a point of tension in your relationship, when you do spend time together, then you're already thinking about the time that you're not spending together, and then it makes it a lot less enjoyable, a lot less present. There's all these pressures involved, so then that person is less likely to want to spend more time with you in the future.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things to where we cause what we fear to happen.
Yeah, this is why we are always talking about anxiety and how you have to work on your anxious attachment style, because his anxiety is going to cause him to make a mess of this breakup. Okay? And don't judge, because you probably did the same thing. I've done the same thing. I've talked about it. We want to fix things so badly, but it usually just makes things worse. Okay. In the middle of April, I received a text. She said she had spoken with her mother, remember I said that was coming up, and thought the best thing for us was to break up. It was because she felt overwhelmed by the pressure to see her, and controlled, exactly what was going with the anxiety, and wasn't happy with my behavior and needed space. It's so frustrating, because you know he just wants to see her, he wants to spend time with her. But where she's at and what's going on in her life, she doesn't have as much maybe time or desire to spend with him. Maybe she's depressed, you know, she's had a trauma history, whatever. But now his desperation to connect is going to make her abandon ship.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is a really great lesson in being able to have a certain skill set when you're dating someone with that amount of trauma. because it does take that extra bit of patience. She probably is interpreting things in a much different light and through a different lens than other people who haven't had those experiences.
Yeah.
Other people might say, okay, that's kind of needy behavior, I'm busy, I have work to do. In her lens, you can see the language there, controlling. And I think that probably holds a lot of weight for her to say.
Yeah, I agree. I made the stupid mistake of begging and pleading and falling apart mentally over the situation. Okay. It sounds very desperate when you're saying falling apart mentally, doesn't it? It almost sounds like chaotic, like scary, out of control. I'm not sure, he doesn't go into too much specifics here, but for me, that's the feeling that I'm getting.
Well, I imagine that a lot of these attempts beforehand to spend more time with her was to feel connected. So the worst case scenario possible happened to him. So I can imagine that freak out. This is everything he was trying to prevent now in play.
Okay, let's see what happens. She went cold and distant, but would reach out every so often saying things like, "How are you? Just checking in to see how you are. Are you okay without me?" So that tells me she genuinely cared about him, right? Because a lot of exes won't do this. You know how cold they can be because they're afraid of the pressure. But it sounds like she felt bad because he was falling apart. And I'm not sure exactly what he was doing. But I think she was like, I hate that he's going through this.
Yeah.
Right?
And for people who have been through abusive relationships, sometimes it can be difficult to differentiate between whether someone's behavior is abusive or not, or if it's mistreatment, or if it's neediness, or if it's desperation, whatever it might be, it can be difficult to differentiate. So I do give her props for being able to say, hey, I need some distance from this, but still be able to lovingly check in with him.
Yeah, I thought it was very kind of her. All right, so she had more to say. I've been crying. This has been hard for me and I love you. But this is for the best. We can be friends. Are you going to date anyone else? Okay, so she's a little worried about him moving on. She would then be jealous or angry at me and would ask who was on my close friends list when I was at the gym and going away camping.
Okay. So, I mean, she's still a little bit interested and curious herself.
Yeah, I agree. Then one day, strap yourselves in. This is where it's going to get rough. Then one day, I noticed I was blocked suddenly on everything, even by her brother and mother. I never thought she would want to throw out our whole lives of connection away just like that. So, boy, that wave of anxiety would feel like a bear attack.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And you're just terrified. But in this case, everything you want to do is, I have to talk to her. I have to fix this. I need to speak to her right now.
And seeing that he was blocked by the family must have hurt on a deep level, too, because he took the time to make a connection with them. She lived with them and was a big part of her life. So I could see him being really hurt by them also pushing him away.
Absolutely.
Or creating some sort of block there.
Oh, yeah. I totally feel bad for him going through this. But this is where a lot of people are going to make major mistakes. This is the difference between the people that wind up turning things around and the people that winding up with restraining orders.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the truth, right? So that's why we're saying you got to work on your attachment issues. I don't think he was doing the workbooks at this time. Maybe had he been doing the workbooks or the creative healing course or in therapy enough, when this happened, he would have been aware of what's going to happen and then been able to do something healthier.
Right. And there's some pretty catastrophic assumptions here with him saying that she's thrown the whole relationship away.
Yes.
While, yes, the blocking is a limit, right? It's a block. However, to jump to the assumption of her throwing the relationship away, there's a lot of undertones of she doesn't care, I'm being discarded. So a lot of...
She never cared.
Right. A lot of these kind of themes showing up. And these thoughts... we don't know if they're true or not, right? But they can definitely increase our anxiety. And we have to think about how we're thinking about the situation, how we perceive it, and how that impacts how we react.
And how we react is often the thing that scares people away. Okay, watch what's going to happen here. And this is what a lot of people do. I panicked, called her phone, messaged her on anything I wasn't blocked on, like an email, then made the stupid mistake of making another account to contact her, and beg and pled to work things out, to apologize and to ask for another chance. There was never any threats or violence, but this caused me to be served with a 12-month intervention order. Okay, so that's like a restraining order, just not what we call it here in the U.S. But this is what I was warning, because this is often what happens, right?
Yeah.
She must have been scared, because I think she genuinely cared about this guy, but he must have overwhelmed so much that she's like, I have to get the police involved. I have to get the courts involved.
And can you blame her? When somebody's been through a certain set of experiences, they're going to interpret that behavior completely differently.
Yep.
It's kind of like just if you've ever been robbed, I bet you will be clutching onto your purse a little bit tighter. I bet you'll be locking your car.
Yeah.
And you'll be taking the necessary precautions. So given the little that we know of her past...
We do know that she had 3 abusive boyfriends that physically abused her, mentally abused her.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe she needed to get intervention or restraining orders on those guys as well.
Right. So I could see her doing the most to protect herself, and it seems like her family is involved now too.
Yes.
So of
Good
course, you know, as good of a relationship that we can have with our partner's family, at the end of the day, they're always going to protect their own.
Absolutely. Within a few days of that, I reached out and got support from a registered therapist for counseling and have been attending every other week for the past 7 months.
Amazing. That's very, very good.
That's great. I have detachment issues as a result of my father mistreating and walking away from my mother when I was in a school camp years ago. He told me suddenly about the situation and then left 30 minutes later. So his dad basically abandoned him out of nowhere. See, now we know where the trauma's coming from. This is why we're always talking about this stuff. That trauma from dad leaving and abandoning the family, it's kind of coming up, but with her doing it the same way. He moved a few states away the next day, and I didn't see him again for years.
Wow.
The last thing my ex said was written on the intervention order, and it said, I never wanted things to get to this point and wanted you to get some help. And there you have more evidence that she genuinely did care about him, which I felt, and I said early on, I thought it was a genuine, sincere care for him. But at the same time, she's so scared, she's going to get the courts involved.
Oh, yeah. And that's a huge step for him to go to therapy.
Yeah.
You know, these things are difficult to face. And when we're in the moment feeling whatever emotions are coming up, we really are convinced that it is completely about our ex. You know, we can't really see the depth of what's happening to us. And so I'm glad that he was able to gain that self-awareness, was able to connect experiences from his past to his present, because it's much easier to balance your emotions when you realize this is not just about what's happening right now.
Exactly. Yes. And that's why we're always talking about it. He says, 7 months later, I am still blocked. I deeply regret how I made a mess of things and let my mental health scare her and her family, especially after it was both our longest and first proper relationship. I really want to prove how I've matured, changed, and worked on my poor behavior, but feel I'll never have the opportunity. Well, you may not have the opportunity with her, but you are going to have the opportunity with other people. And these behaviors and this trauma that you've had from your childhood, you've got to work through. You don't have to do it for your ex. You need to do it for yourself, because you are going to have other relationships. And if you don't work on it now, it's going to hurt you again with somebody else that you're attached to.
Right. And I think this is a good example of the more you overwhelm someone, the more space and distance they are going to need to recover. Now, in this case, they have a legal contract that delineates the amount of time that they will be apart from each other.
Yeah.
Or that they can even contact each other legally. So that's a restriction right there.
Yep, and that's a year. And so it's only like at the halfway point.
Right, right. And so in a sense that's good because he has no other choice. He's almost in a forced no contact.
Yeah.
But he does need to work on himself. He does need to work on these things to where once that order is done and has expired, that he will continue to maintain no contact. He will continue to be able to respect her boundaries and her limits. The analogy that I'm thinking in this situation, it's kind of like when you get locked out of an iPhone. The more times you try to type in the wrong password, the longer you have to wait before you're able to try again. This is exactly what it's like with people too.
And those of you that may have toddlers,
you get locked out for like a month, from your phone.
It's been 15 years. The iPad still hasn't unlocked.
And so you have to give people that space to be able to decompress, to be able to process what's happened, and in this case, for her to feel safe again. We have to be really sensitive to someone's past experiences. This is somebody who has been through a lot, and unfortunately, the anxiety has caused you to be inconsiderate of some of her experiences.
But we don't want to be naive here to the fact that when you get the courts involved and the legal system involved, it obviously makes it a lot less likely to turn around. Impossible? No, of course not.
Right.
But obviously, when things get to that level of seriousness, people are that afraid, people are that willing to get the courts involved, the legal system involved. You can't ignore that, right?
Yeah, yep. And there is a future. I loved what you were saying about the work that you're doing here is really in preparation for whatever is next for you. And so on one hand, this was something that was extremely devastating, but on the other hand, which is something we see all the time, this can really be the thing that catapults your life in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and at least he's working on himself. He's in therapy. He's been in therapy. So good things are happening because
of this. And he's young. There's a lot of time to be able to work through these things and have different experiences, have different opportunities. So in the grand scheme of things, it's good that he's learning about these things now. And we're very grateful that he's been able to connect with our content. He's been able to go to therapy and just work on these skills that will last a lifetime.
Hopefully he's doing the creative healing course or the workbooks. Those will help him a lot. He's wondering, are things over for good? Is there any hope of a second chance? Like we said, there's a lot to it. Obviously, when things get the court system involved, it makes things more complicated. You can't legally reach out for another 6 months, but even at that time, I would say definitely don't reach out. Okay? She's got to be the one that's got to reach out. And if she does, you really need to take things a lot slower than most other breakups would, because we have a lot of fear here, a lot of trauma here, her trauma history, the fact that she got this scared, the fact that her parents are involved, she's living with her family, so obviously they know everything. They probably like this guy because I think she genuinely cares about him and probably still does, but they're also going to say, well, look at what he did. Yeah. You don't want to give him another chance. So they're going to have impact on her, especially being that she still lives at home. If she was older and maybe living on her own, she might be making her own decisions more without worrying about the input of the family. But she is living at home and she is going to hear their opinion about it. And you can't ignore the reality of that.
Right. Right. And likewise for you, I'm sure you have people in your circle who know about your situation, and there can be a level of shame just based on how you acted, a level of shame based on, having this legal restriction now. It's important to work through that. There's a lot of feelings about what has happened so far, but this is not the end of the story. This is definitely not the end of your story.
No, absolutely not. And for those of you that are struggling, listen, there are things that make your situation worse. Showing up at their house is probably the worst one you could do. It scares people. We say don't send clean slate messages or handwritten letters because that is more pressure. But when you back away and you leave someone alone and allow them the time to reflect and consider things, like we tell you, that's how we teach no contact, is no reaching out. When you do that, you're not going to make things worse in the sense that somebody's not going to feel scared or pressured or manipulated. And so it takes away a lot of things that usually make the situation worse.
Right, and it's important to work on being able to regulate your own mood. When your mood is so contingent on spending time with someone else, or whether they care about you, or how affectionate they are towards you, or where they stand, or what their mood is, then it becomes very fickle. It causes you to do a lot of things that you might not do if you were more level-headed or in a space where you were more emotionally balanced.
Absolutely.
So it's our hope for you.
It's a lot. This is why we do coachings. This is why we tell you every relationship is different and every breakup is different, because it truly is for so many reasons. So if you want to get our help personally, you could do that on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype. Coach Victoria is also available for Skype coaching.
I'm here whenever you'd like to chat.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to schedule with her. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.